Welcome to my tutorial series and the final part of my project where I create this real-time animated model from scratch. And if you want to support these type of videos, you can find me on Patreon, link in the description. So, today we're finally gonna start rigging the character. And, well, I'm kinda glossing over a step here, I suppose. The baking of the high poly textures onto the low poly model, but there's so many tutorials out there and it's a straightforward process, so I don't think I need a whole video to cover that. But yeah, you can see here how I started by importing a humanoid armature. I've developed this armature myself, many iterations over, I don't know, 15 years or something. But this is the one I'm using these days. And you can see how I start by modifying the rig so that all the joints and that stuff is lining up. This model is a rather unusual model. The standard way of rigging these characters is in the famous T-pose, where they're sort of standing with the arms at their sides, and there's a good reason for that. It's the most neutral pose that translates into sort of all the poses you need, and it makes it, if not ensures, at least makes it easier to ensure that all the deformations and so on line up and work properly. But what I'm actually doing here to the right arm is modeling and rigging it held up by the hand grenade. And I'm doing this slightly differently since, well, that's the pose, that's the default pose for this character. It's gonna be hovering with the hand near the pin for the hand grenade. So it's a bit unusual, it's not how you normally do this, but you can see how I'm just editing the rig to work with that. Also, the torso is a bit, how do I put it, offset to the side due to the embedded propane tank in the body. So there's a little difference there. But here you can see how I've gotten all the bones in the right place. I've started setting up the rotation of the bones, or rather the roll along the length of the bones. And there's a very simple sort of best practice you want to follow here, and that's to place the Z-axis towards the how do I explain this? When a joint is bending, you want this Z-axis to point towards the direction of the most natural or normal or prominent bending. So for an armpit, you want the Z-axis to point straight up out of the armpit, so to speak. And having all the bones aligned in this way makes it a lot easier to start adding these bone modifiers, I think they're called in Blender, but essentially, inverse kinematics and bones that copy rotations from other bones and so on. And in the rig I've developed, I have some specific setup bones managing the curl of the fingers, the spread of the fingers, and all that stuff. And it only really works properly if all of the bones are have the right roll. So yeah, this is quite easy. I just go through all the bones, make sure the Z-axis is pointing in the right direction. And if you're doing a T-pose model, all of these rolls are gonna be pretty much correct right away. You don't need to worry much about it. The only reason I need to correct so many of them here is because I'm doing this kind of odd job rig where not only is the right hand up held to the grenade, but the left arm is also rotated to show the palm of the hand toward the viewers rather than pointing down, as is a more common way of doing it. But yeah, you can see here I'm testing the secondary rig, which handles the the curl of the fingers and so on. And what I'm doing here is just going through, checking all the different IK bones, the bones that I use to drive the entire rig, and seeing, is this behaving as it should? Are the elbows and so bending? And then I do just parent the meshes to the armature with a automatic weight. And then I go in, trying out and find problem areas. Like, since I'm doing this kind of oddball rig with the hand near the hand grenade, the automatic weight decided that all the finger bones should affect the sort of fleshy lump that holds the grenade, and that's obviously not right. So I go in here, find all the vertex groups, just go in and delete all the fingers, finger vertex group weight assignment from fleshy stuff, all the entire upper part, the head. And for things like the eyes and the grenade and the propane tank and so on, where I'm only parenting them to a single bone, I just go in and manually set up a single vertex group. I think I parented the grenade and the propane tank to the chest bone, since, well, they're attached there and they're not gonna move in relation to the chest bone. So, yeah. And after that, I just go through all the bones, start correcting weight, painting, fixing problem areas, constantly testing, having this character sort of spaz out, moving all the different parts. And yeah, that's pretty much it as far as setting all that up. The teeth here as well only need to be parented to the head bone, same with the eyes. They aren't affected by the torso or whatever. It's just the head. And you can also see that I created this model with a sort of open mouth, going as wide as it will go, more or less. And I'm not using any bones for the face. I don't have. You see, for some rigs they have all of these bones for the lips and the nose and the eyebrows and all that stuff. And my rig comes with eye bones, because usually I have eyes on my characters. For this one though, they're just these glowing orbs, so you can't really tell which way he's looking. So at the start I just deleted those bones. I won't need them. But all of the facial expressions and so on, I will actually be driving them using shape keys rather than armature. This is a really nifty way of working, because I create some extra bones in the control rig. I'll be doing that in a little while. And sort of like you can see the curl left bone here I'm using to drive the curl of the fingers on the left hand. I create these driver bones that I use and have them inform what happens with the shape keys. So, for example, I create one shape key for mouth closed, and I have a bone drive that, so I can just... What am I doing? Oh, right. Once the rigging is in place, the first step is usually to create some sort of simple animation where the character is moving a lot, to see how everything works. And I, for some reason, decided to have my propane tank mutant do a dance. He's flossing, so that's what you see me doing here. I think I have, on my secondary monitor, I have a video up of instructional video how to floss, and I just move through the video and skip a couple of seconds or something, and then set up that pose and the next pose and so on, and in between it interpolates. So yeah, here we are. Very important model animation test. And yeah, I'm very happy with the fact that I can bring down the right arm to his side without the mesh sort of breaking apart, even though I model it in this oddball fashion. And once that's done and I see, well, everything seems to be working, I actually start on a proper idle animation. So the plan for this enemy is to have a couple of different states. So right now I'm working on the relaxed idle state, meaning this character or enemy hasn't detected the player yet. So it's just sort of standing around and breathing and moving a little bit, just making sure it's not completely static. Later on I also added a agitated idle state where the mutant is actually holding the pin of the grenade and signaling sort of I'm ready, bitch, I'm gonna blow you up. And here you can see me starting working on the shape keys. A very standard one is the sort of breathing where the chest expands. So I just add a shape key here where you can see I'm pulling the shape key manually and you can see the chest is expanding and contracting. And after that I set up the control bone. And I think I'm about to start that soon. What was I talking about before the mutant started flossing? Yeah, that was the shape keys. Alright, yeah, you can see here how I'm setting up the breathing. No, this is the mouth open. Alright. So, yeah, I realized this isn't really a ground level sort of tutorial. I'm not actually creating the rig. The plan is to make this rig available on the Patreon Discord server. So as I update it and so on, I'll keep posting new versions on the Discord server. So any of my patrons can just use the same rig that I'm using and don't have to worry about creating their own. And if you want to create your own rig from scratch, I recommend checking YouTube tutorials, and I also recommend starting with something simple like a leg or a finger or whatever. There's a lot of fantastic tutorials out there, and I've been inspired by a lot of them myself when I've been updating and changing this rig. I updated the way the hand rig works about a year ago, and I think I was inspired by specific tutorials where they were setting up the curl and the IK points and so on. I tried to find it on YouTube, but I couldn't find a specific one. I don't even remember which one it was, but there's a lot of great materials out there. So just look around, start experimenting, create simple rigs. Just don't worry about creating a character or whatever if you haven't rigged anything before. Just create a cylinder with a lot of loop cuts along the length and start adding deformation through different kind of bone chains and bone modifiers, inverse kinematics, and all that good stuff, and figure out how it works. Man, I really like the background music of this episode. So, what else can I share? Pretty much the same thing as the previous 7 parts of this series. Practice, practice, practice. Have fun, experiment. Don't be afraid of failing. Just you're gonna fail so many things before you start getting them right. It's all a part of the process of learning. Just make sure to scale down the project so you're not trying these monumental, huge things all the time. Try working on small things, and that way when you fail them you can just move on to the next and you have one in the bag, so to speak. It's rigging, as everything else, is a lot about experience, figuring out how a mesh reacts to the bones underneath, and it's also a good idea to try and get them into your game engine of choice early on as well. Sometimes there's a little bit of difference between how Blender handles a deformation and say Unity or Unreal Engine or whatever, and it's the same deformation. So you might run into some edge cases where things aren't doing exactly as you expect. So it's important to learn all of those. All right, here I'm noticing, hey, that doesn't seem right. There's some mesh deformation going on. That's not correct. And I just go in, find the vertex group and repaint it. And yeah, the strange weird dark blotch on the shoulder is gone. And yeah, this has been a really interesting series to make. It's my first series, first time creating something in this format, and it's proved very useful and a lot of fun. It's driven me to edit a lot more videos. I mean, I think I've doubled the number of videos on my channel in a week. So, but yeah, here's I'm working on the agitated idle state where he's sort of looking around in and trying to find a player. Yeah, thank you so much for following this entire series, and I hope it was useful to you, despite maybe not being as in depth or base level as it could have been, but it's my first time, so I'm gonna blame that. And hopefully I've given you enough to start asking questions, start finding more tutorials on specifics, diving deep into parts and topics that I've covered briefly or sort of from a top level perspective. So the plan going forward with this project will be to get this guy into Unity and set up the AI and all that behavior, and I'm going to try and document that as well, and yeah, record videos, and maybe, I'm not promising anything, but maybe my next series will be on the game development part for this character and the environment it was created for, with the gameplay and all that good stuff. But it's probably gonna be a little while before I get to that. The next coming videos should be on some other projects. I've managed to amass quite a backlog of projects. I think I have 3 or 4 or something, where I've gone all the way from concept art to VR sculpting to texturing and all that stuff, and I've even rigged a couple of them, I think. So I'm probably gonna cover those next and try and get rid of all the videos that's filling up my hard drives. I'm interested in doing some kind of series-like format for those as well. I don't think there's any real point in making them same as this, a tutorial series, because I would be covering all the same disciplines and all the same software and all the same ideas again, so, but with a different model, enemy, whatever. So that's probably not useful, but I'll look into and try to figure out some way of splitting them up into parts and talk a little bit about on what I'm doing and showing, and maybe build a bit on top of this, perhaps. Yeah, I'm still brainstorming, but I think in general making these into several parts proved to be very, very nice, very useful. Previously, when I've been making these videos like the Piranha or the Oracle or whatever, it ended up being this sort of massive project where I've edited like, I don't know, 50 hours of video down into this 15-minute sort of thing, and at the end I'm usually so exhausted that I sort of gloss over a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of work for very little video. So yeah, if you have any thoughts or suggestions or ideas, whatever, just let me know in the comments below. I make sure to read all comments and reply when I have something useful to say. So, yeah. Again, thanks so much for watching, and until whatever the next project is, bye!